I returned from a business trip and found my gold digger daughter-in-law caring for my husband. She had fired the caretaker. When I got home, she offered me food. I refused. She left to go shopping, and my husband came to me and said, "Don't accept anything from her. She just wants our $4 million. She's swapping my meds." So we devised a plan. 2 weeks later. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Evelyn, and I'm 63 years old. After 38 years of marriage to Colin, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I was wrong. The flight from Dallas had been delayed 3 hours, and by the time I pulled into our driveway, exhaustion weighed heavy on my shoulders. The business trip had been successful, securing a major contract that would keep my consulting firm thriving well into my retirement years. I was eager to share the good news with Colin and maybe open that bottle of wine we'd been saving. But something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of my car. The house was too quiet. Usually, I'd hear Martha's voice drifting from the kitchen, or the soft murmur of the television Colin liked to watch during his afternoon rest. Instead, an unsettling silence hung over everything like a heavy blanket. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, my hands suddenly unsteady. The house felt different somehow, colder, despite the Texas heat outside. I called out as I entered, "Colin, I'm home." No answer. "Martha." Still nothing. I dropped my suitcase by the door and walked deeper into the house. The living room looked pristine, too pristine. Martha always kept things tidy, but this felt sterile, like a show home rather than the warm space Colin and I had built together over the decades. That's when I heard footsteps on the stairs. "Oh, Evelyn, you're back early." Zadie's voice carried that saccharine sweetness I'd grown to distrust over the past 2 years since Louis married her. She descended the stairs with practiced grace, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite it being past 6 in the evening. "Where's Martha?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Zadie's smile never wavered. "Oh, I had to let her go. The expense was becoming too much, and honestly, I think Colin and I were managing just fine without her." My stomach dropped. Martha had been with us for 18 months, ever since Colin's health began declining after his heart attack. She wasn't just a caregiver, she was family. Colin adored her, and she genuinely cared for him in ways that went beyond professional duty. "You let her go?" I repeated, my voice barely controlled. "You don't have the authority to—" Louis agreed it was best. Zadie interrupted smoothly. "We're family now, after all. I can take care of Colin just as well as any hired help. Better, actually, because I truly care about him." The way she emphasized family made my skin crawl. Zadie had been nothing but trouble since the day Louis brought her home. At 28, she was 15 years younger than my son, with no job, no apparent skills, and an alarming interest in our family's financial situation. She'd wormed her way into Louis's heart with practiced ease, and now apparently, she'd set her sights on something bigger. "Where is Colin?" I demanded. "Resting upstairs. He's been having a rough few days. I think the change in routine upset him a bit." Her tone was matter-of-fact, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "He's been very confused lately. More than usual." My blood ran cold. Colin had mild cognitive issues following his heart attack, but he'd been stable for months. Martha had even mentioned in our last phone call that he'd been having more good days than bad ones. I pushed past Zadie and hurried up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. Our bedroom door was partially open, and I could see Colin lying in bed, looking smaller and frailer than when I'd left him just 5 days ago. "Colin?" I called softly as I entered. His eyes opened slowly, and for a moment they seemed unfocused. Then recognition dawned and relief flooded his features. "Evie," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You're back!" I rushed to his side, taking his hand in mine. His skin felt papery and cold, and there was a tremor I hadn't noticed before. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" He glanced toward the door, then back at me, his eyes suddenly alert and urgent. "Where's Martha?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Zadie says she had to let her go." Colin's grip on my hand tightened. "No, he said firmly. That's not right. Martha wouldn't just leave. She promised she'd be here when you got back. Before I could respond, Zadie appeared in the doorway. I thought I'd make dinner for everyone. It's so nice to have the family together again. She smiled brightly, but her eyes were calculating. Evelyn, you must be exhausted from your trip. Why don't you let me take care of everything tonight? Something in her tone set off every alarm bell in my head, but I forced myself to smile. That's very thoughtful, Zadie. As she turned to leave, Colin squeezed my hand again. When her footsteps faded down the hallway, he pulled me closer. Evie, he whispered urgently, his eyes darting toward the door. Don't accept anything from her. Don't eat anything she gives you. Don't drink anything. My heart stopped. Colin, what are you saying? His voice dropped even lower, so quiet I had to strain to hear him. She's been changing my medications. I've been watching her. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. She wants our money, Evie. All of it. The $4 million we've saved. She's trying to make me worse. The room seemed to tilt around me. $4 million. Our entire life savings. The result of decades of hard work and careful investment. The money we'd planned to live on during our retirement. To travel. To enjoy our golden years together. Are you certain? I whispered back. Colin nodded grimly. She doesn't know I've been pretending to be more confused than I am. I've been watching her, Evie. She's dangerous. Just then, Zadie's voice drifted up from downstairs. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Colin's eyes locked with mine, and I saw a fear there that chilled me to the bone. My husband, the man who'd faced down business rivals and life's challenges with unwavering strength, was terrified. And if Zadie was really doing what Colin suspected, we were both in more danger than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, I woke before dawn with Colin's warning echoing in my mind. Don't accept anything from her. The words had haunted my dreams, transforming into a nightmare where I watched helplessly as everything I'd built crumbled around me. Colin was still sleeping, his breathing shallow but steady. In the early morning light, I could see how much weight he'd lost in just the 5 days I'd been gone. His cheekbones were more prominent, and there were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before. I slipped out of bed quietly and made my way downstairs. The house still felt wrong, like a stage set designed to look like my home, but missing all the warmth and life that made it ours. I started a pot of coffee, needing the familiar routine to ground myself. You're up early? Zadie's voice startled me. I turned to find her standing in the kitchen doorway, already dressed and perfectly put together despite the early hour. I was going to make breakfast for everyone. That's not necessary, I said carefully. I can manage. She moved into the kitchen with the confidence of someone who belonged there, opening cabinets and refrigerator as if she owned them. Nonsense. You're still tired from your trip. Besides, Colin has been eating so poorly lately. I've been trying to encourage him to keep his strength up. My stomach clenched. What has he been eating? Oh, you know how he is. Very particular about his food. I've been making his favorites. Oatmeal in the morning, soup for lunch. Simple things his stomach can handle. She pulled out ingredients with practiced efficiency. He seems to enjoy the oatmeal especially. I add honey just the way he likes it. I watched her movements, looking for anything suspicious, but she appeared completely natural. Too natural, perhaps. As if she'd rehearsed this performance. Where did Martha keep Colin's medication schedule? I asked, trying to sound casual. Zadie paused for just a fraction of a second. Oh, I have all that organized now. Don't worry about it. I've been very careful to follow all the doctor's instructions. I'd like to see it. Of course. Her smile never wavered. It's upstairs in my room. I can show you later. My room. She was staying in our house, in our guest room, treating it like she belonged here permanently. The audacity of it made my hands shake with suppressed rage. Over the next hour, I watched Zadie prepare breakfast with meticulous care. She hummed softly as she worked, occasionally glancing at me with that bright smile. Everything about her demeanor screamed innocence, but Colin's words kept circling in my mind. When Louis arrived for his usual morning check-in, my heart lifted slightly. Maybe I could talk to him, make him see what was happening. Morning, Mom. He kissed my cheek. but there was a distance in his manner that hadn't been there before my trip. How was Dallas? Successful. We landed the Morrison account. That's great. But his attention was already shifting to Zadie, who was plating eggs and toast with theatrical precision. Zadie's been amazing while you were gone. I don't know what we would have done without her. I studied my son's face. Louis had always been trusting, perhaps too trusting, but this seemed different. There was an almost defensive quality to his praise of Zadie, as if he was trying to convince himself as much as me. She certainly has made herself at home, I said carefully. Louis's expression tightened. Mom, we talked about this. Zadie is family now, and she's been incredibly helpful with Dad. The doctor even said, What doctor? I interrupted. Dr. Hamilton didn't mention any changes when I spoke to him last week. Zadie looked up from her cooking, and I caught a flash of something in her eyes before the sweet mask slipped back into place. Oh, we had to see Dr. Morrison instead. Dr. Hamilton was unavailable, and Colin was having such a difficult day. Dr. Morrison. I'd never heard of him. And Colin had been seeing Dr. Hamilton for over 10 years. I wasn't aware Colin was having problems. It was Thursday, Louis said, his tone taking on that edge I recognized from his teenage years when he felt cornered. Zadie called me at work, worried sick. Dad was confused, agitated. Dr. Morrison said it's normal progression, but he adjusted the medication dosage. My blood turned to ice. What medications were adjusted? His heart medication and the cognitive supplement, Zadie answered smoothly. Dr. Morrison said the previous doses weren't strong enough. I excused myself and went upstairs, my mind racing. Colin was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with a lost expression that broke my heart. How are you feeling this morning, sweetheart? Tired, he admitted. And my stomach's been upset. Zadie keeps bringing me oatmeal, but it tastes strange, different than when Martha made it. I sat beside him, taking his trembling hand in mine. Colin, I need you to tell me exactly what happened Thursday, when you saw this Dr. Morrison. His brow furrowed. I don't remember seeing any doctor Thursday. I remember being in the kitchen with Zadie, and she was showing me these pills. She said they were new, that Dr. Hamilton had called them in, but I never talked to Dr. Hamilton. The room felt like it was spinning. What did the pills look like? Small, white, different from my usual ones. When I asked her about it, she said I was confused, that these were the same pills I'd been taking all along. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I know they weren't, Evie. I may have problems with my memory, but I'm not completely gone yet. A sound from downstairs made us both freeze. Zadie was calling up to us, her voice artificially cheerful. Breakfast is ready. Colin, I made your favorite oatmeal. Colin's grip on my hand tightened. Don't let her know we're talking about this. She watches me constantly, and Evie. He looked directly into my eyes, and for a moment, he seemed completely lucid. I think she's been going through our papers, our financial documents. I caught her in the study twice, but when I asked what she was doing, she said Louis asked her to help organize things. My heart pounded as the pieces began falling into place. Zadie wasn't just neglecting Colin or being careless with his medications. This was deliberate, calculated. She was slowly poisoning my husband while positioning herself to take control of our assets. And Louis, my own son, was either too blind to see it or too manipulated to care. As we made our way downstairs for breakfast, I forced my face into a mask of normalcy, but inside, a cold determination was taking shape. If Zadie wanted to play games, I would play along. But I would be watching her every move, documenting everything, until I had enough evidence to expose her for what she really was. The war for my family had begun, and I had no intention of losing. 3 days passed before I found the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Colin and I had been careful, communicating only through glances and subtle touches, maintaining the facade that everything was normal, but every moment felt like walking through a minefield. Zadie had settled into a routine that made my skin crawl. She would appear in our bedroom every morning at exactly 8 o'clock with Colin's breakfast, the oatmeal she insisted he loved. I watched her face as she fed him, noting the way her eyes gleamed with satisfaction each time he struggled to finish the bowl. She'd taken over completely, answering his phone calls, monitoring his mail, even going so far as to cancel his weekly poker game with his old business partners. "He's not feeling up to it," she would tell them with practiced concern. "Maybe next week." But it was Thursday afternoon when I discovered just how deep her deception ran. Lewis had stopped by for lunch, and Zadie had insisted on cooking for all of us. As she busied herself in the kitchen, chattering about some trivial gossip, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Instead, I slipped into my study. My desk, usually organized to my exact specifications, showed subtle signs of disturbance. Papers had been moved, files shifted. But it was when I opened the locked drawer where we kept our most important financial documents that my blood ran cold. The drawer wasn't locked anymore. Inside, our investment portfolio summary was missing. So were the life insurance policies and the deed to our lake house in Austin. Papers worth millions of dollars gone. In their place was a single business card. Jenkins and Associates, estate planning attorneys. My hands trembled as I Googled the firm on my phone. They specialized in expedited estate transfers and crisis financial management for families in transition. The kind of lawyers you called when you needed to move assets quickly and quietly. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly closed the drawer, slipping the business card into my pocket. "Evelyn?" Zadie's voice called from the hallway. "Is everything all right?" "Just looking for my reading glasses," I called back, forcing my voice to sound normal. When I returned to the kitchen, I found her stirring a pot of soup that smelled delicious but looked somehow wrong. Too thick, with an odd greenish tint that didn't match any soup I'd ever seen. "This is Colin's lunch," she said brightly. "I've been experimenting with different recipes. He seems to digest this one best." I watched Colin's face as she set the bowl in front of him. He looked at it with barely concealed dread, but dutifully picked up his spoon. After just a few bites, his hands began to shake more noticeably, and a fine sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. "I think I need to rest," he said quietly. "Of course, darling." Zadie was immediately at his side, helping him to his feet with theatrical concern. "You overdid it yesterday. I keep telling Lewis you need more care, not less." As she guided Colin toward the stairs, I caught his eye. He looked terrified. That evening, after Zadie had finally left to go to her and Lewis's apartment, Colin and I sat in our bedroom with the door locked. The conversation we'd been postponing couldn't wait any longer. "She's going to kill me," Colin said simply, his voice steady despite the enormity of the statement. Not quickly, not obviously, but slowly. "She wants it to look natural." I pulled out the business card I'd found. "She's already planning for afterwards." Colin studied the card, his face grim. "Estate planning attorneys. She's not just trying to hurt me, Evie. She's planning to take everything we've worked for, 38 years of our lives." The weight of our situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. We were dealing with someone who was not just greedy, but genuinely dangerous. Someone who was willing to commit murder for money. "We need proof," I said. "Real evidence, not just suspicions." Colin nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that. What if we give her what she wants?" "What do you mean?" "What if I got worse? Visibly worse? If she thinks her plan is working, she might get careless, overconfident." The idea of watching Colin pretend to deteriorate was almost unbearable, but I could see the logic in it. It's dangerous. What if she decides to speed things up? Then we'll be ready for her. Colin's eyes had a steel I hadn't seen since his business days. But first, we need allies. The next morning, I called Martha from my office. Her number had been disconnected, which confirmed my suspicions about how she'd really left our employment. It took some detective work through mutual acquaintances, but I finally reached her at her sister's house. "Mrs. Peterson?" Martha's voice was cautious. "I'm so glad you called. I've been worried sick about Mr. Peterson. Martha, I need to know exactly what happened when you left." There was a long pause. "I didn't leave, Mrs. Peterson. I was fired. That woman, your son's wife, she told me you decided you didn't need my services anymore. When I asked to speak to you about it, she said you were busy and didn't want to be bothered." My heart clenched. "She lied to you. I figured that out pretty quickly." Mrs. Peterson, there's something else. The day before I was fired, I caught her in Mr. Peterson's bathroom, doing something to his pills. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was just organizing them, but... Martha's voice dropped. I've been a caregiver for 20 years. I know what pill tampering looks like. Why didn't you tell someone? I tried to call you, but your daughter-in-law said you'd changed your number and didn't want staff calling you directly. I was going to contact your son, but then she fired me. Martha's voice hardened. Mrs. Peterson, I think she's trying to hurt him. That night, Colin and I finalized our plan. It was risky, potentially dangerous, but it was the only way to expose Zadie before she succeeded in whatever she was planning. Colin would begin showing signs of rapid deterioration. We would make it seem like her treatments were working better than expected. Meanwhile, I would install hidden cameras in key areas of the house and document everything she did. If this goes wrong, Colin said, holding my hand in the darkness of our bedroom, if something happens to me, nothing will happen to you, I interrupted. I won't let it. But even as I said the words, I knew we were stepping into territory from which there might be no return. Zadie had already shown she was willing to go to extreme lengths for money. If she suspected we were onto her, there was no telling how desperate she might become. The next morning, Colin began his performance. At breakfast, he knocked over his coffee cup and stared at the spill with confusion. When Zadie asked if he was all right, he looked at her blankly for several seconds before recognition dawned. Sorry, he mumbled. I don't know what came over me. I saw the flash of satisfaction in Zadie's eyes before she masked it with concern. Oh, Colin, maybe we should call Dr. Morrison. No doctors, Colin said quickly, playing his part perfectly. I just need rest. As I watched Zadie's face, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't just satisfied with Colin's apparent decline. She was excited by it. The tiny cameras arrived 2 days later, disguised as a flower delivery. I'd ordered them online using a business credit card Zadie didn't know about, and had them delivered to my office before bringing them home hidden in my briefcase. Installing them took careful timing. Zadie had established a routine where she went grocery shopping every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, leaving Colin alone for exactly 90 minutes each time. She claimed it was because he needed his rest, but I suspected she was meeting with someone during those absences. Colin helped as much as he could, keeping watch while I positioned the microscopic devices in the kitchen, his bathroom, and the study. The cameras were so small they looked like decorative buttons or tiny screws, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Are you sure this will work? Colin asked, his voice barely a whisper as I adjusted the final camera in his medicine cabinet. It has to, I replied, but privately I was terrified. What we were doing felt like something out of a spy movie, not the quiet retirement we'd planned for ourselves. Over the next week, Colin's deterioration became more pronounced. He would forget words mid-sentence, stumble on the stairs, and stare at familiar objects with apparent confusion. The hardest part was watching him play this role, knowing that each performance brought him closer to real danger. Zadie's behavior changed too. She became more confident, more proprietary. She started answering our house phone as if she lived there permanently, telling callers that Colin was resting or having a difficult day. She rearranged furniture without asking, replaced Colin's favorite coffee with a brand that made him nauseous, and began wearing my jewelry when she thought I wasn't looking. But it was Lewis's reaction that broke my heart most. Mom, I think we need to talk about Dad's care, he said during one of his visits. We were sitting in the living room while Zadie fussed over Colin in the kitchen, spoon-feeding him soup like he was a child. What do you mean? Lewis shifted uncomfortably. Zadie thinks he might be happier in a facility, somewhere with professional medical staff. She's been researching some really nice places. My blood went cold. Your father doesn't want to be in a facility. But Mom, look at him. He's gotten so much worse. Even Dr. Morrison said, I want to meet this Dr. Morrison, I interrupted, in person. Lewis's expression grew defensive. Why? Don't you trust Zadie's judgment? I trust my own judgment about my husband's medical care. Mom. Lewis's tone took on the patronizing quality that made me want to shake him. You work 60 hours a week. You can't provide the kind of care Dad needs. Zadie's there all day, and she sees things you don't see. I wanted to scream that Zadie was the cause of Colin's decline, not the solution to it. But without proof, I would sound like a paranoid old woman, exactly the image Zadie wanted to cultivate. Let me think about it, I said instead. That night, I reviewed the footage from our hidden cameras. What I saw made my hands shake with rage. The kitchen camera had captured Zadie crushing unknown pills into Colin's oatmeal every morning. The bathroom camera showed her switching his regular medications with different pills from an unmarked bottle. But it was the study footage that revealed the true scope of her plans. She'd been photographing all our financial documents with her phone: bank statements, investment portfolios, life insurance policies, everything. She'd also been on the phone with someone, though I couldn't make out the conversation clearly through the tiny camera's audio. But Thursday's footage showed something that made me physically ill. Zadie was in the kitchen, preparing what looked like Colin's usual soup. But this time, she added something extra: a clear liquid from a small vial that she kept hidden in her purse. The liquid had no smell, no color, and dissolved completely into the soup. I enhanced the footage as much as I could, zooming in on the vial's label. I could just make out 2 words: digitalis extract. My nursing background from 40 years ago kicked in. Digitalis was derived from foxglove, a plant that could regulate heart rhythm in tiny doses but was deadly in larger amounts. It was particularly dangerous for someone with Colin's heart condition. She wasn't just trying to make him confused and weak. She was slowly poisoning him to death. I called Martha immediately despite the late hour. "Mrs. Peterson, is everything all right?" "Martha, I need you to think very carefully. When you caught Zadie with Colin's pills, did you see what she was doing exactly?" She had his heart medication bottle open, and she was putting some of the pills into a different container. When I asked about it, she said she was separating his morning and evening doses to make it easier for him. But Mrs. Peterson, those pills looked different, smaller. Different how? Well, Mr. Peterson's heart medication is usually blue, oval-shaped. These were round and white. I remember thinking it was odd, but she was so confident, so professional about it. She said his doctor had changed the prescription. My worst fears were confirmed. Zadie had been substituting Colin's life-saving heart medication with something else, possibly digitalis in doses designed to gradually weaken his heart until it simply stopped. The next morning, Colin and I sat in our bedroom, doors locked, speaking in whispers about our next move. "We have to be careful," I said, showing him screenshots from the camera footage. "If she knows we're onto her, she might panic and do something drastic." Colin studied the images, his face grim. "How long do you think I have?" "I don't know, but we can't wait much longer to act." "What about Louis?" That was the question that kept me awake at night. Our son was completely under Zadie's influence. She'd isolated him from friends, convinced him that his father was declining rapidly, and positioned herself as the only person capable of handling the situation. Any attempt to expose her would likely be met with denial and accusations that I was the one who wasn't thinking clearly. "We need irrefutable proof," I said, "something so clear that even Louis can't ignore it." That's when Colin had an idea that was both brilliant and terrifying. "What if we let her think she's succeeded?" he said slowly. "What if I have a heart episode, a fake one, and we see what she does?" The idea of Colin pretending to have a heart attack made me nauseous, but I could see the logic. If Zadie was really trying to kill him, her reaction to a cardiac event would reveal her true intentions. A caring daughter-in-law would call 911 immediately. Someone trying to commit murder might hesitate, or even try to prevent him from getting help. "It's too dangerous," I said. "Living like this is too dangerous," Colin replied. "Every day I pretend to eat her food, every pill she gives me, every moment I spend alone with her, it's all dangerous. At least this way we control the situation." We spent the rest of the morning planning every detail. I would be out running errands when Colin's episode occurred. He would make sure Zadie was the only witness. We would have a hidden camera recording everything, and I would return within minutes of his collapse. The plan was set for the following Tuesday, during one of my usual grocery runs. As I kissed Colin goodbye that morning, Neither of us knowing if it would be for the last time, I whispered, "I love you." "I love you too, Evie. And when this is over, we're going to have a very different conversation with our son." I drove to the grocery store with my heart pounding, checking my phone obsessively. In exactly 30 minutes, Colin would put our plan into action. In 30 minutes, we would finally know the truth about the woman who had wormed her way into our family. What we discovered would be worse than either of us had imagined. I was standing in the cereal aisle of the grocery store when my phone rang. The caller ID showed our home number, and my heart immediately began racing. This was it. Colin was putting our plan into motion. "Hello?" I answered, trying to sound normal despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Evelyn?" Zadie's voice was breathless, panicked. "You need to come home right now. Something's wrong with Colin." What happened? I gripped the phone tighter, abandoning my cart and hurrying toward the store exit. He just collapsed in the living room. He was sitting in his chair, and suddenly he started clutching his chest. "He's conscious, but he's very pale and sweating." Her voice caught in what sounded like genuine distress. "I don't know what to do. Did you call 911? There was a pause that lasted just a fraction too long. I wanted to call you first. I know how much you worry about him going to the hospital." My blood ran cold. No genuinely concerned person would hesitate to call for medical help during a heart episode. This was exactly what Colin and I had suspected would happen. "Call the ambulance now, Zadie. I'm on my way home." "Okay, yes, of course. I'll call them right now." I hung up and raced through the parking lot, my mind spinning. If Zadie was really trying to kill Colin, this would be her perfect opportunity. She could delay calling for help, claim she panicked, and by the time paramedics arrived, it might be too late. But Colin wasn't really having a heart attack. He was acting, and he was in control. At least I hoped he was. The 20-minute drive home felt like an eternity. I kept checking my phone, expecting another call from Zadie with worse news. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I noticed something odd. There was no ambulance, no paramedics, no emergency vehicles at all. I burst through the front door to find Zadie kneeling beside Colin's chair in the living room. He was slumped over, eyes closed, his face ashen. For a terrible moment, I wondered if something had gone wrong, if his fake heart attack had somehow become real. "Where's the ambulance?" I demanded. Zadie looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "They said it would be 20 minutes. I've been trying to help him, but he won't respond to me." I rushed to Colin's side, feeling for his pulse. It was strong and steady, too steady for someone having a genuine cardiac episode. His breathing was shallow but regular. When I touched his hand, he gave my fingers the slightest squeeze, so brief I almost missed it. He was okay. He was still acting. "Colin?" I said loudly, playing my part. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Evie? What? What happened?" "You had some kind of episode. The paramedics are coming." Just then we heard sirens in the distance, but instead of relief, I saw something flash across Zadie's face, something that looked like disappointment. The next few hours were a carefully orchestrated performance. The paramedics checked Colin's vital signs, found them stable but concerning enough to recommend a hospital visit for observation. Colin played his part perfectly, complaining of chest tightness and dizziness while maintaining the appearance of a man who'd just suffered a cardiac event. At the hospital, Dr. Hamilton examined Colin thoroughly. I'd called ahead and explained the situation to him privately, that we were conducting our own investigation into some concerns about Colin's care. Dr. Hamilton was skeptical at first, but when I showed him photos of the digitalis and the medication switching we'd documented, his demeanor changed completely. "This is very serious, Mrs. Peterson," he said quietly while Colin underwent tests. "If someone has been giving him digitalis in combination with his current heart medication, it could have killed him. Will the blood tests show what's been happening?" "They should. Digitalis poisoning leaves traces in the system for several days." Dr. Hamilton's face was grim. "If your suspicions are correct, we'll have concrete evidence." Meanwhile, Zadie maintained her performance as the concerned daughter-in-law. She stayed at the hospital for hours, holding Colin's hand, speaking to him in soothing tones, even bringing him coffee from the cafeteria. To any observer, she appeared to be a loving family member devastated by her father-in-law's condition. But I was watching her carefully, and I noticed things others missed. When she thought no one was looking, she checked her phone obsessively. She made several whispered phone calls in the hallway, and most tellingly, when the doctor mentioned that Colin's condition appeared stable and he might be released the next day, her face fell in a way that had nothing to do with relief. Louis arrived that evening, rushing into the hospital room with genuine panic on his face. "Dad, how are you feeling?" He grasped Colin's hand, his eyes red with unshed tears. "Better," Colin said weakly. "Just tired." Louis turned to Zadie, who immediately melted into his arms. "Thank God you were there," he said, stroking her hair. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been taking such good care of him." I watched this display with a mixture of heartbreak and rage. My son was comforting the woman who was trying to murder his father, and he had no idea. "The doctor wants to keep him overnight for observation," I told Louis. "Just to be safe, of course, whatever he needs." Louis looked at Zadie with such gratitude it made me sick. "Honey, you should go home and rest. You've been here all day." "I don't want to leave him," Zadie protested. But I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was weighing her options, trying to figure out how to maintain her concerned act while also pursuing whatever her next move was. "I'll stay with Dad tonight," Louis said. "You've done enough." Finally, Zadie agreed to go home. As she gathered her purse, she leaned over Colin's bed and kissed his forehead. "Get better soon," she whispered, and to anyone else it would have sounded like a loving farewell. But Colin and I both heard the underlying message: this isn't over. The next morning, Dr. Hamilton called me into his office with the blood test results. "I'm afraid your suspicions were correct," he said, sliding a lab report across his desk. "Colin has significant levels of digitalis in his system, far more than would be therapeutic. In fact, given his current heart medication, this combination could have been fatal within days." My hands shook as I stared at the evidence in black and white. "How long has this been going on?" "Based on the concentration levels, I'd estimate he's been ingesting regular doses of digitalis for at least 2 to 3 weeks, possibly longer." Dr. Hamilton's expression was grave. "Mrs. Peterson, this is attempted murder. You need to contact the police." But I wasn't ready for that step yet. I had evidence of poisoning, but I still needed to connect it definitively to Zadie. If she had any warning that we were onto her, she could disappear, destroy evidence, and we'd never be able to prove what she'd done. There was one more test I needed to conduct. That afternoon, while Colin remained in the hospital recovering, I went home alone. Zadie was there, as I'd expected, cleaning the kitchen with unusual thoroughness. She was wiping down every surface, washing dishes that had already been clean, even scrubbing the inside of the garbage disposal. Destroying evidence? I thought to myself, but aloud I said, "Zadie, you don't need to clean. You should be resting." "I just want everything to be perfect for when Colin comes home," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I feel so responsible for what happened." "Responsible? Why would you feel responsible?" She paused in her scrubbing, and I saw her carefully choose her words. "I should have noticed the signs sooner. I should have insisted he see Dr. Morrison earlier in the week when he was complaining about feeling tired." Dr. Morrison again, the mysterious doctor I still hadn't met. "You know what would make me feel better?" I said casually. "If I could speak to Dr. Morrison myself, just to understand Colin's condition better." Zadie's hands stilled on the dish rag. "Oh, he's very busy. Hard to reach, but I'm sure he'll want to see Colin again soon." "Could you give me his number? I'd like to call his office." I don't have it with me, it's at home." She resumed her aggressive cleaning. "But I'll get it for you tomorrow." I nodded and went upstairs, but instead of going to my bedroom, I slipped into the guest room where Zadie had been staying. I knew I was crossing a line, invading her privacy, but given what she'd been doing to Colin, I felt no guilt about it. Her suitcase was open on the bed, clothes neatly folded inside. But it was what I found in the nightstand drawer that stopped my heart. A cell phone I'd never seen before, obviously a burner phone. When I powered it on, There were dozens of text messages from a number I didn't recognize. The conversation thread made my blood run cold. How much longer? Read one message. Soon. He's getting weaker. Maybe a week, was Zadie's response. Good. The buyer is getting impatient. $4 million is a lot to wait for. I know, but it has to look natural. The old woman is suspicious. Handle her if you have to. The final message was sent just hours ago. Problem? He's in hospital. Might have to accelerate timeline. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Zadie wasn't working alone. She had an accomplice, someone who was waiting for Colin to die so they could claim our $4 million in assets. And now they were talking about handling me if necessary. I quickly photographed the entire conversation thread, then put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. As I crept back downstairs, I could hear Zadie still in the kitchen, but now she was on her regular phone, speaking in hushed tones. I don't care what you think, she was saying. The plan is still good. He'll be home tomorrow and then we finish this. I had heard enough. More than enough. It was time to end this nightmare before Zadie decided to handle me permanently. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early with Detective Sarah Martinez, whom I'd contacted the night before. She was a woman about my age, with kind eyes but a steel spine, exactly what I needed for what was about to happen. Colin was sitting up in bed, looking much healthier than he had in weeks. The hospital had been flushing the digitalis from his system, and his natural color was already returning. Are you ready for this? Detective Martinez asked him. Colin nodded grimly. I've been ready to end this nightmare for weeks. The plan was simple but risky. Colin would be discharged as scheduled, and we would return home where Zadie was waiting. Detective Martinez and her partner would be stationed outside, ready to move in the moment we gave them the signal. Meanwhile, I would wear a wire to record any incriminating conversation. But first, we needed Louis to understand what was really happening. When my son arrived to take Colin home from the hospital, I asked him to step into the hallway with me. Louis, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I began. Your father isn't getting better because Zadie is taking good care of him. He's getting worse because she's been poisoning him. Louis's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, then anger. Mom, that's a serious accusation. Do you have any idea what you're saying? I handed him the lab report from Dr. Hamilton. Your father has been ingesting digitalis for weeks. It's been mixed into his food and substituted for his regular medications. If we hadn't figured it out when we did, he would be dead within days. Louis stared at the paper, his face pale. This could be a mistake. Lab errors happen. It's not a mistake. I showed him screenshots from the hidden camera footage and photos of the text messages I'd found. Louis, she has a partner. They're planning to steal our entire savings after your father dies. For several minutes, Louis said nothing. He just stood there, absorbing the evidence, his world crumbling around him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. How long have you known? We started suspecting something the day I came back from Dallas, but we needed proof before we could act. Why didn't you tell me? The question I'd been dreading. Because she had convinced you that we were the problem. Every time we tried to express concerns, you defended her. We were afraid you wouldn't believe us. Louis closed his eyes, leaning against the hospital wall. God, what have I done? I brought her into our family. I gave her access to everything. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. She's a professional manipulator. She knew exactly how to play on your emotions. When we arrived home, Zadie was waiting with what appeared to be a homecoming celebration. She'd cooked Colin's favorite meal, decorated the dining room with flowers, and even bought a welcome home banner. The irony was almost too much to bear. She was celebrating the return of the man she'd been trying to murder. Colin, you look so much better, she gushed, helping him to his favorite chair. I was so worried about you. Louis watched this performance with new eyes, and I could see the disgust growing on his face. But he played his part, acting as if nothing had changed. Zadie's been taking such good care of everything while you were gone, he told Colin. I don't know what we would have done without her. She certainly has been. attentive, Colin replied, meeting my eyes briefly. Over the next hour, I watched Zadie's behavior with the knowledge of what she really was. Every gesture of concern was calculated. Every loving touch was performance. When she brought Colin his afternoon medication, I had to grip the arms of my chair to keep from screaming. "Dr. Morrison called while you were at the hospital," Zadie said, handing Colin 2 white pills. "He wants you to start taking these new supplements to help with your recovery." Colin looked at the pills, then at me. This was it, the moment we'd been waiting for. "What kind of supplements?" Colin asked. "Heart strengtheners," Zadie said smoothly, "to prevent another episode like yesterday." "I think I'll wait until I can speak to Dr. Hamilton about any new medications," Colin said, setting the pills aside. I saw something flash in Zadie's eyes. Frustration, anger, calculation. "Colin, Dr. Morrison is a specialist. He knows what's best for your condition." "Then I'd like to meet him," I interjected. "Maybe we could all go to his office together." Zadie's mask slipped just slightly. "He's very busy. Hard to get appointments with." "What's his full name again?" Lewis asked suddenly. "I'd like to look him up online." The question caught Zadie off guard. She stammered for a moment before saying, "Dr. Morrison. James Morrison. He's at the cardiac clinic downtown." Lewis was already pulling out his phone. "Funny, I don't see any Dr. James Morrison listed at any cardiac clinics in the city." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Lewis's fingers tapping on his phone screen. Zadie's face had gone pale, and I could see her mind racing, trying to come up with an explanation. "Maybe he's new," she said weakly. "Or maybe he doesn't exist," Lewis said, his voice cold, just like Zadie's concern for my father. The mask came off completely then. Zadie's sweet expression vanished, replaced by something hard and calculating. She looked from Lewis to Colin to me, weighing her options. "I don't know what you people think you're playing at," she said, her voice completely different now, harder, cruder. "But you're making a big mistake." "The only mistake was trusting you," Lewis replied. Zadie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really think you're clever, don't you? Setting up your little trap, but you have no idea what you're dealing with." She reached into her purse, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might have a weapon. Instead, she pulled out the burner phone I'd photographed the day before. "Marcus," she said into the phone, "we have a problem. They know." That was our signal. I pressed the panic button Detective Martinez had given me, and within seconds, we heard car doors slamming outside. Zadie's eyes went wide as she realized she'd been trapped. "You set me up," she snarled. "No," Colin said, standing up with more strength than he'd shown in weeks. "We exposed you." The front door opened, and Detective Martinez entered with 2 other officers. "Zadie Williams, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." As the handcuffs clicked around Zadie's wrists, she turned to Lewis with venom in her eyes. "You're all going to regret this. Marcus won't let this go. He knows where you live." "Marcus Hendricks is already in custody," Detective Martinez said calmly. "We picked him up an hour ago based on the evidence Mrs. Peterson provided." The relief that washed over me was so intense I nearly collapsed. It was over. Finally. Truly over. 3 months later, Colin and I stood on the deck of our lake house in Austin, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. His health had returned almost completely once the digitalis was out of his system. The doctors said it was remarkable how quickly he'd recovered. But I knew it was more than medical treatment. It was freedom. Lewis had filed for divorce from Zadie the day after her arrest. The investigation had revealed that she and Marcus had been running similar cons across 3 states, targeting elderly couples with significant assets. We weren't their first victims, but we were determined to be among their last. "Do you ever regret it?" Colin asked, slipping his arm around my waist. "Fighting back instead of just accepting what was happening?" I thought about that question for a long time. The past months had been difficult. The investigation, the trial preparation, the media attention we hadn't expected. Lewis was struggling with guilt and betrayal. Our family had been through trauma that would take time to heal. But we were alive. We were together. And we had our future back. Never, I said firmly. We fought for our life together, and we won. Colin squeezed my hand. What do you want to do with the rest of it? I smiled, thinking about the travel brochures I'd been collecting, the cooking classes I'd always wanted to take, the books I planned to read. Everything. I want to do everything we never had time for before. A year later, we renewed our wedding vows in a small ceremony at the lake house. Louis walked me down the aisle, his own healing visible in his smile. Martha, whom we'd rehired immediately after Zadie's arrest, caught the bouquet and laughed like a teenager. As Colin and I exchanged new rings, simple bands inscribed with the date we'd saved each other's lives, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. She had been afraid, reactive, always trying to keep peace at any cost. But sometimes peace isn't possible. Sometimes you have to fight for what matters most. And sometimes, the people you're fighting against are the ones who should have been protecting you. I was no longer that woman who accepted betrayal in the name of family harmony. I was someone who had learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just enabling. As we danced our first dance as a twice-married couple, Colin whispered in my ear, "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for saving mine," I whispered back, because that's what we had done. We had saved each other, and in doing so, we had discovered that the best years of our marriage were still ahead of us. The nightmare was over. The dream was just beginning. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.